Good evening and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, Thomas Sheridan. My website is thomassheridanarts.com and on YouTube it's Thomas Sheridan Arts. It's March 23rd, 2016 and I haven't done a show for a couple of weeks for a couple of reasons. One, I really haven't had anything to talk about, and also I wasn't well after I got a really terrible virus while I was over in Sardinia doing the Megalithic Odyssey filming, and I think I touched some contaminated water, or maybe it was something in the food. I don't know what it was, but I became very ill while I was there, and I still finished the documentary somehow, mainly because the doctor had prescribed me amphetamines, but which was an experience in itself. But I got back home and I still wasn't right for about another week and a half after that. But then I started feeling amazingly excellent and amazingly well. And so, then I didn't have anything to really talk about. There wasn't really anything much. Not the kind of person who sits there saying the same thing week after week, year after year. I wouldn't do this if I was like that. I'm not here to be a performing seal or a repeater, a truth repeater. Isn't it ironic that the ones who tell you about the repeaters in the mainstream have been saying the same shite for the last 20 years in the alternative? Anyway, I digress. So I hope you're all keeping well, and I hope you're all doing well and enjoying this change in season. Now, the first thing I want to talk about tonight is the entire horror that took place in Belgium yesterday, the bombings at both the airport and the metro station in Brussels. I would ask for people to calm down first of all before jumping on these things. The first stuff I saw in terms of Thruferism was that usual. It was an Illuminati occult sacrifice 322, referring to the 3rd of March, March 22nd. Firstly, and also the skull and bones, very disgusting and despicable, and I do agree, creepy secret society, which is the Bush family and the rest of them are all involved in there at Yale over in New Haven in Connecticut in the USA. Yes, but that immediately told me we're dealing with Americans, because in Europe it's the 23rd of the 22nd of the 3rd. It's 22/3. You got it back to front. So that was the adrenaline and the dopamine and the norepinephrine stress hormones firing up in the truthers, getting them all fired up because it's been a long time since they had their truth fix. And the worst ones of all will just go mad. They were desperate for something like this, so their special brew and GMO super skunk saturated skulls were on the line going, it's an Illuminati conspiracy, a conspiracy. And then what proof did they offer it was a conspiracy and a false flag, an inside job? Well, it took place on the festival, the Illuminati satanic festival of Ostara. Now, anyone out there right now who is claiming that the Ostara festival is the beginning of a satanic season or is a satanic festival, do not listen to this person ever again. They are morons. They are morons who are not giving you anything close to truth, and they're even worse than the mainstream. The festival of Ostara is the celebration of the earthly mother goddess, awakening from her winter slumber in order to bring birdsong, flowers, seeds, and new life to the earth. It's one of the most beautiful celebrations. It's a pan-heathen European celebration, and these people who are calling a satanic sacrifice are uneducated morons. Uneducated morons, okay? Firstly, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about false flag versus reality, okay, or an actual terrorist thing, right? Let's start with the idea that it's a false flag, right? So we know these things exist. I have no doubt from my own years of look. I knew about Gladio before 9/11 even happened. I knew about Gladio before Ruby Widge and Waco happened. So no one has to lecture me that I haven't done my research. I was out there in the field doing these things. I was up in upstate New York in Van Cortlandt Park, in the Bronx, and in Yonkers, running around looking for temples and shrines and sacrifice places for the process church of the final judgment. That's the kind of work I was doing while you were like, still watching the Noel Edmonds and the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So don't lecture me because you've seen a few things online that I haven't done my research. I've done research that you wouldn't even know about. Secondly, if this is a false flag, you see, this is the thing that kills me. I shouldn't use that term; it's quite distasteful now, but that drives me bonkers, right? Is this idea that no one gets killed at these events and they're all crisis actors. Where that ever came from, it must have been generated by the intelligence services themselves. Because if this is an intelligent operation that was run by the secret services or any of these bombings or anything, they want as many real dead bodies as possible because it impacts the psychological trauma on society and it gives them the excuse to unleash whatever security or defense mechanisms they have ready waiting to roll. They want as many innocent corpses on the ground blown to bits. They're not interested in crisis actors. Do you really think if they're going to use something like this to kill people in foreign countries that they're actually going to pretend to kill people? We're talking about statists, psychopaths, fanatics. These people are devoted to the state in the same way that a flying sauce cult member is devoted to his crazy mother-in-law who channels herself as a god in the future. These people are just as psychotic and they're just as dangerous. They don't care. They have no qualms. They are fanatics. They're absolute fanatics. They want as many dead as possible. When this has happened all, from Gladio to the Loyalist bombings in Dublin in 1974, they wanted the highest body count. That's why they parked the car bombs next to bus stops during rush hour. They wanted to blow as many innocent people to bits as possible so they could get their agenda. This is what happens. There are no crisis actors. There may be crisis actors in terms of things like people being interviewed on TV as witnesses telling lies. If anyone's the real crisis actor, it would be them. That's the ones you look for. Now, but the people lying on the ground with their bodies mangled, texting their family because they're thinking they're going to die, which is a natural human behavior. And the reason why they're calm is they're in shock and their leg is hanging off. Shock does the strangest things to people. It actually puts them into a zombified state. And these people are not screaming. That's not the norm. They sit there. Anyone will tell you about a bomb ever went off. There was an initial scream and then there was a deadening silence that lasted for a couple of minutes. This is the shock. People's brains literally cannot cognitively process what has been done to them. They're lying there with the bottom of their legs missing. They're not taking selfies. They're trying to call for an ambulance for themselves or they're saying goodbye to their loved ones because they think they are dying. What is wrong with you people? This is why people think conspiracy theorists are all lunatics, because you post pictures of people dying, people dead, trying to text their wives and their children and their families goodbye because they're bleeding to death, and you're going, ha ha ha, taking selfies, see you for Netflix and chill later, baby. What is wrong with you? What has happened to your brains? I'll tell you what's happened to your brains. You have electromagnetic spectrum fever. Just like cabin fever, people who are locked in the woods for months and years on end, they go mad, they go insane, they go bonkers. And they start to see devils and demons and witches and things that don't exist. And this is what happened. You see, that was a movie I saw the other night called The Witches. And it was all about this pioneer, puritanical, religious fanatic family on the end of the wilderness in the United States somewhere in the 1600s. Literally, they might have well been on another planet. And what happens is they had a cabin fever that manifested itself through its religious fanaticism of the Puritans, actually generating the demons, devils, and witches of their imagination, bringing them to life almost like tulpas. This is what's wrong with these motherfuckers who are on the computer all going, I'm researching, I'm looking for false flags, I'm a truther, I'm an investigator. You're a fucking dick, you're nothing. You're sitting there year after year, chain smoking cigarettes, drinking tons of coffee, hitting the skunk, hitting the six special brew, and the electromagnetic cabin fever comes in. It comes into you. And you start looking at pictures of a girl with hair on a phone that looks nothing like the same girl in any of the photographs, and suddenly she is the international crisis actor. And then you share the picture on your Facebook page, and all your friends from your previous life want fuck all to do with you anymore, because you look like a nut. You know why? Because you are a fucking nut. You have electromagnetic spectrum fever. That's what's going on. Electromagnetic spectrum fever. And it's no different than when you have these terrified mainstream people at home who think there's terrorists around every corner going to blow them up and all this stuff. They have TV electromagnetic spectrum fever. You have YouTube truther site electromagnetic spectrum fever. You're in the cabin and you're seeing devils and demons that don't exist. And what's happening is you're missing the real demons. The real demons. Who are the real demons and the devils inside the cabin when they had cabin fever? Starvation, disease, dehydration, wild animals coming to get you. So you're forgetting your survival techniques, your cognitive defiance, when you're too busy looking for crisis actors, false flags, and all this stuff. Ha ha! Or my favorite one. It fits the narrative. Let me tell you about intelligence services. There is no fucking narrative. Zero. None. That's the whole point of an intelligence service. This is why they're not on the internet. You are. The only reason the intelligence services uses computers is to spy on you. Otherwise, everything they do is word of mouth. They don't even type things down on type paper and print it out. They don't. Everything is word of mouth. They operate like classic secret societies, and that's where they actually came from. And Druids, it's word of mouth. Because it works. And they don't know who the other guy is. Like, you could be working on an operation and you're introduced to Red Squirrel and 29, Fox Bat, and Mr. X, or whatever the fucker's name is, and you will never meet those bastards ever again. Ever. You don't know who they are, where they came from, you'll never meet them again. When you're an intelligence service operator, you are in a bubble. You don't know shit. You're in a cell, you're in a microcell. That's really only you and what you're given information from. And you have nothing to go. If you wanted to go to the press or frauds like WikiLeaks or Edward Snowden or Anonymous, you wouldn't have any paperwork to give them. You wouldn't have any files to give them. They don't exist. You could only go in there. Well, a guy called Mr. Franklin told me to be in a certain place at a certain time. Do you have proof? No, he just told me. Well, then how do we know you're in the intelligence services? You see how it works? So you're looking for intelligence. You're looking to blow the intelligence community open by searching on Google. Are you mad? That's like a chicken. That's like a chicken, right? Thinking he can live in Colonel Sanders' house. That's what that's like. A chicken who thinks he can live in Colonel Sanders' mansion because he works for KFC. That's how deluded you are. You don't think. You have to think. Okay, so just saying this is, I'm not ruling it out it or isn't. To me, it is what it is on the surface. On the surface, jihadists blowing up innocent people. Now, then you'll say, oh, well, that's racist against Muslims. No, there's crazy motherfuckers in all religions, right? All of them. Remember, well, the Abrahamic religions especially. There's nothing but crazy motherfuckers. And Remember George Bush and his crusade in Iraq? Where do you think that language came? That's weaponized Christian language. That's Abrahamic language. Anyway, the guys, the motherfuckers who walked into those train stations, just like the ones in Paris, even if they were government spooks, were still thinking that they were dying for Allah, that they were getting their 72 versions. Because they wouldn't have any direct handlers. You'd have the main, like here's how we know this from the IRA. It's coming out. That the main IRA guys on the frontline operation were sincere. They believed what they were doing. The cell leaders, a lot of them, not all of them, were working for British military or secret intelligence. So the same thing with the stupid bastard who walks into the Brussels train station and goes Allah Akbar, Akbar, and pulls the switch, and the last thing he sees is the 3 little children in front of him he's going to blow to bits before he gets his 72 virgins of heaven, which I believe are 72 demons which will ass rape them for all eternity. Before he does that, he really believes he's doing it for Allah and the Quran and jihad. Ahmed! He really does. Because he's an uneducated moron 9 times out of 10. He's the Islamic version of the stupid American who, I'm joining the US military to fight for freedom! Freedom! I got me some freedom! And then he goes over to the Middle East and he's killing someone for oil. It's the same version. That dumb redneck from Buttfuck Junction, Alabama, thinks that he's fighting for freedom! Well, we all know he's fighting the oil companies. And Ahmed in Brussels, who's blowing kids and women and men to bits and commuters to bits, thinks he's going, for Allah, for Allah! The same thing. The shadow is like Carl Jung said, the shadow of one is the shadow of the other. The shadow of one is the shadow of the other. And so truthers who are on the internet going absolutely fucking 322 Illuminati sacrifice. They are the shadow of the mainstream liars. The shadow of the shadow. It's not an improvement. It's more bullshit. They become what they hate. Those bombs and those attacks are Islamic lunatics. Okay, I'm not putting down all Islam, although those 3 religions from the Middle East, I have no time for them. Jihadists. In some cases, they will have been manipulated from an external intelligence source. In some cases, they won't. But the prime mover, the spark, the justification, if you will, was their Quran. The Quranic jihadist ideas. That's where it gestated. And so get out of this idea that, they were all MI5 agents and there was no bomber and they're all crisis actors. No, there was a bomber, he was a jihadist, and the victims are real, even if it was a false flag, which I doubt it was, because we have unfortunately let large numbers of ISIS combatants into Europe. Thank you, Angela Merkel, because corporations know that the birth rates in Europe are declining and they want to flood Europe with these refugees from the Middle East so they can work on zero contract hours and below minimum wage jobs in places like Starbucks and McDonald's. This is why all these fast food places and supermarkets in Europe are banning pork products from their shelves. It's not because it offends the local Muslim shoppers. It's because they want to get these new people from the Middle East as their new wage slaves in their corporate environments. And that's what Angela Merkel, Bob Geldof, Peter Sutherland, People Before Profit, the Socialist Workers' Party, Right to Change, this is why they want to flood us with immigrants. They want to make sure there's enough employees from abroad, slave labor employees doing these menial jobs, and if some of them are former ISIS lunatics who rape women en masse at the train station in Cologne, shoot up innocent kids having a nice night out at a concert in Paris, or blow up train stations in Brussels, well, the likes of Peter Sutherland says in his mind, well, it's a price we have to pay in order to keep Starbucks and the rest of them going. And this is what you're dealing with, okay? Wise up, Get wise, think, expand your horizons beyond Illuminati sacrifice, satanic sacrifice. Get that out of your fucking head. You're in the electromagnetic spectrum cabin fever again. Think. Think. Expand your minds. Oh, God almighty. And more importantly of all, don't be sharing pictures of people who are dead and dying on the internet, because you're robbing those people of their souls in the last moment of their lives. And you're taking away the dignity of their dying. And you shouldn't do that. And you're in no position to start slagging off fear porn in the media. And I mean, I have to laugh at them. They're showing the same motherfuckers who put memes up saying, and now 24 hours of BBC fear porn, then go on 24 hours of Truther fear porn. It's like the ones who they were putting up memes saying, oh, that's another one. You fuckers who are using what happened in Brussels yesterday and saying things like, well, they had it coming because we bombed Syria and the Middle East and killed loads of Muslims. Fuck you. That's disgusting. That is disgusting. These are innocent people. All innocent deaths, no matter where they happen, are still innocent. And these are the same bastards who are pointing this out are the ones who are all gay for Putin and his attack gunship helicopters and drones blowing up Syria. You had no problem with that. Whoa, go Putin. He's a hard man. He knows how to deal with ISIS. And there's the helicopter gunships and the MiG bombers and the drones, blowing the shit out of anything that moves in Syria, what they suspect is ISIS. And hundreds of civilians got killed as well. And the same ones who do that are on the internet now saying, yeah, but, maybe in Brussels, they're getting a taste of what we in the West have done to the Middle East. I haven't done anything to the Middle East. Nobody I know has done anything to the Middle East. We have no control in the West over our psychopathic globalist leaders. We don't elect them. They're the ones who own the armies. They're the ones who own Gladio. They're the ones who own NATO. How are people going to work in Brussels or kids enjoying a concert in Paris somehow responsible for that? Have you lost all your empathy as a human being? And you'd be the first ones to call anyone a psychopath. You really would. I mean, he's a psychopath. He's a psychopath. He tells dirty jokes. He's a psychopath. He doesn't have empathy like me. Oh, and those Belgians who got blown up in Brussels, they deserved it because of what happened to Palestine. This is why people hate you. This is why I throw you off my Facebook page. This is why nobody likes you. This is why nothing ever changes, because you don't think, you just react. You want those stress hormones and adrenaline flowing in your brain, going bonkers when you're getting your latest truth fixed. And you cause as much damage psychically as bombers do with bombs. You're causing the friendly fire. And instead of people, we want people to actually look at these things and say, what is Gladio? They're not going to look at the fucking thing if they see a picture of Skull and Bones 322. They're not going to look at that. They think you're going to be a nut job. Because you are a fucking nut job. Grow up. Grow up. Anyway, on to the rest of the show. Now, speaking of conspiracies, one of the reasons I have stuck at this whole thing for so long is because there really are conspiracies and the mainstream really are insane. And I only want to be battling them. I don't want to be in the position where I'm having to battle both sides of the issue, because this is why we need focus, okay? Now, as mentally ill as these people are who see a photograph of a woman with a phone in Connecticut at the school shooting there, and a phone of a woman in Belgium with her leg blown off and a phone and saying the same woman, as mental as those people are, it's always worth it for me to remind myself how mentally ill the so-called mainstream is now and again. And this was expressed eloquently in an article by Noel Rooney in a recent edition of 40 Times. Now, 40 Times is a magazine I've been reading since decades now. I was reading it when it used to be a newsletter, and it's still the best magazine in the world. Now, for a while there, they were very anti-conspiratorial, but something has happened in the last couple of years where they've warmed up, and they actually research the thing in a non-smarmy way. They actually give both sides of the equation. So they're like me. They see conspiracies as much as an interesting topic of discussion in terms of what the conspiracy thingy is, as much as the conspiracy itself. There's lots to learn, and they have a regular feature called the Conspirasphere, where they examine the latest conspiracy theories, and they're actually quite fair. And I'm going to give you an example of it. And it goes, this article is by Noel Rooney, and it's about he's not entirely convinced by one scientist's attempt to quash conspiracy theories with the aid of a few graphs. And I'll read the article now. And it goes, is it possible to derive an algorithm that predicts the potential failure rate of a conspiracy? On the face of it, this is a quixotic endeavour at best, but David Robert Grimes, a physicist and cancer researcher at Oxford University, has taken up the challenge. His recently published paper is titled On the Viability of Conspiratorial Beliefs, but it's actually about the theoretical viability of conspiracies themselves. Using a range of modelling formulae, including the Gopard-Thez ratios used by insurance companies to predict the death rate among its customers, and analyses based on the number of people potentially involved, one more on that point below, he has arrived at the conclusion that, given a few minutes' thought, required very little mathematical acumen. If a conspiracy involves large numbers of people, the probability that it will be exposed is considerably high. Dr. Grimes is primarily concerned with the anti-scientific thinking. That's because he's in cancer research and he doesn't like all these alternative cancer theories. He's trying to find a model with sufficient explanatory power to persuade people reluctant to accept vaccines, global warming, or orthodox treatments for cancer. There you go, that the scientific community is not out to get them. That's laudable in many respects. Blanket mistrust of science and the people who go do science is very limited and limiting cognitive model. I agree with that. You should never distrust all scientists. You should always say we know there's a lot of bullshit goes on, but that doesn't mean it's all bad. Remember, life is two extremes. It's between the dark and the light and the shadow. And you look at both sides. The Grimes model attempts to show a probability curve for exposure of a given conspiracy on the number of people involved and their average life expectancy. Thus, he concludes that, for instance, the lunar landing hoax, if hoax it was, would have been exposed within 3 years and 8 months. It also offers an estimate of the optimal number of conspirators required for a conspiracy to succeed. For a point to survive 5 years in secrecy, a maximum of 2,521 people should be involved. For a decade of success, under 1,000 conspirators are needed. And for a plot to survive unexposed for a full century, the conspirators should number no more than 125. Thereby hangs one of the principal and comical weaknesses of the Grimes model. For instance, he estimates that conspirators' numbers for the moon landing hoax as a total number of NASA employees as the late 1960s. So the tea lady is the same weighing in on the model as the chief architect on the landings, or no landings in this case. Obviously, it's not easy to estimate the numbers of conspirators based on actual involvement until the plot is exposed, but there ought to be more subtle weighing formula available than anyone's ante. I'm not convinced we will see conspiracy theories regularly measured on the Grimes Index in the near future. First of all, the true believers are unlikely to turn face when presented with a mere graphic. What's a graph compared to years of research conducted from a million armchairs? Secondly, until Mr. Grimes separates those who have a different opinion with a point of view, those who reject vaccinations on the ground that it is crude herd medicine, for instance, from those who believe it's all a big lie, those who think Bill Gates are co-planning eugenics by injection, his model is as crude as the extremities and beliefs he wants to change. That is a superb article. That is proper journalism, folks, by Noel Rooney. That is proper journalism. He's not taking sides, he's showing reality. And he makes a very important point at the end there, is that these egghead boffins, like this guy, this David Robert Grimes, this professor guy, he thinks that all conspiracy theorists, every last one of them, are like the worst case scenario of a truther, of the most toxic, insane, like the most biggest bonkers flat earther type. When in reality, the vast majority of conspiracy theorists are quite relaxed and laid back folks who may have a genuine concern about vaccines or cancer treatment, or feel that 9/11 doesn't quite add up. But that doesn't mean they're on a gigantic rampage to believe everything is a conspiracy. Those people are actually a tiny, tiny number. This guy Grimes makes the assumption that they're all like the character that Mel Gibson played in that movie Conspiracy Theory, or they're all like Fox Mulder in the X-Files. And Fox Mulder's character was created for that reason, by the way. Created for that reason. That they believe everything. Everything. And they also took this idea that in the past you had Forteans like me. Forteans are interested in the anomalies. They're interested in mysteries. They're interested in exploring them. But we don't necessarily have a hard belief in them. It is the fascination with the oddity, the fascination and the intrigue of the mystery and the intrigue and the nuances of these topics that we find fascinating, not necessarily a steadfast belief that if you see a light in the sky, it's automatically an alien spaceship, or it's the Virgin Mary, or it's a djinn, or a tulpa in my case. It could be anything. But the fact that it exists is interesting enough to go with. This is what these people don't understand. That the average conspiracy theorist, most people are conspiracy. When you get down to it, most people are conspiratorial about something, except people who have PhDs. Generally, they're absolute mind-controlled morons. Or newspaper journalists are the biggest thickos of them all. Biggest thickos of them all work in journalism. But everyone else is conspiratorial about something. Like, for instance, and civil servants, they're also the biggest nitwits too. In fact, I was on an Irish group recently where someone said, do you believe in any conspiracy theories? And the majority of the people said, there's something to many of them. There's 90% noise and bullshit. And there are some genuine conspiracies. And there was one motherfucker on there, and he was literally the reverse, the shadow of the most fucked up truther, in that he could not get it into his head that there could be ever any conspiracy in anything. And someone had mentioned a case that happened in Donegal here in Ireland, where basically the cops were caught and implicated in the murder of a cattle dealer in order to shut them up because he saw some corruption. And it was blown wide open, and it was exposed. And these guys saying, well, here you go. Some people were saying, here's a conspiracy. Bang, right there. The thing that happened in Donegal back in the 90s. And the guy said, it's not a conspiracy, it's a mystery. And that's how brainwashed these types are. There's no such thing as a conspiracy. That doesn't exist to them. Everything is on the level. They have a kind of an Asperger's view of reality. And this is what these civil servants, PhDs, and newspaper journalists are all like. All of them. Not all of them. Like, that's what they're like. That's how they've been indoctrinated. They cannot see, a lot of civil servants won't see any fault with government because they are the fucking government. You understand? And therefore, they are the wheels that are greasing the wheels of evil. So they cannot allow themselves to think that government is evil in any way because their paycheck depends on them being a whore for this evilness. Very good, very good. So I suggest keep those of you. I've had people in recent years say that 14 times has gone down. All they do is slag off conspiracy theorists. That has happened, but they've definitely come around, and they're a lot better now than they used to be. And the magazine and the rest of the magazine is just phenomenal. It's just they had in the last issue they had a thing about David Bowie's and the occult. It was just brilliant. Just one of the best things I've ever read. On other matters, those of you who read my book Valpurgis Night Volume 1 will know how seriously and deeply and most interested I am in the occult aspects of National Socialism and the Third Reich. Now, when that book came out, it was at the time when Hitler was very fashionable among the truthers. They'd all seen that movie, Hitler, the Greatest Story Never Told, and all these people, like the same morons who said, who were against big government, all thought that Hitler was a great leader. They would post memes saying, when you realize that the true leader you need is inside yourself, then you are free. And then the next, without a hint of irony, the next thing would be posting the film, the Greatest Story, Adolf Hitler, the Greatest Story Never Told. And they would be saying, this is the greatest leader of all time. This is the kind of man we need. Well, back on planet Earth, there is incredible amounts of information, data, historical evidence, and contemporary evidence to suggest that National Socialism was a product of the occult, more so than a product of any political philosophy. It's almost as if it was a reaction to the atheism of Soviet socialism that they went with supernatural socialism. Now, Adolf Hitler did make speeches saying that we reject occultism. What he was saying was we reject all the occultism that is in ours. He even mentions that National Socialism is the only religion you should follow. This is what the 1934 Reich Concordat was about with the Vatican. They said, we'll leave the Catholics in Germany alone if you allow us to develop National Socialism as a kind of a political, philosophical religion to replace Christianity in Central Europe. They also had something on the Pope at the time, Pope Louis. He was the papal nuncio based in Bavaria, and he'd had an affair apparently with his housekeeper, and the Gestapo had known all about this. Well, what was to become the Gestapo had known all about this, and they basically blackmailed the Vatican with this because he was Pope at the time. But there are tons and tons and tons and tons, endless amounts of hard information to show that the National Socialism was a product of Germanic occultism, particularly Ostara. This is not the goddess Ostara, but it was what they based it on, and a thing called Ariosophy. Ariosophy was the belief that blood itself had a magical power, and by attaining pure blood, they would by invoking this idea of these Aryan pure blood, they would attain a state known as Vilra, which would mean that they were one of the Vril, and then these angelic Aryan blonde angels would emerge from the earth and help them become the master race. That's what this is the fundament. This is why it was all the fun. They mixed that with also a corruption of Nordic spirituality. But this is real. This is all real stuff. Now, something fantastic has happened this week, and I'm going to read this article from the Ancient Origins websites.net, one of the better websites out there. I don't read many websites anymore, but this is a pretty good one for the most part. There's a lot of interesting stuff in it, and they do, in general, do good research. It's one of the few websites for now in its current state, hope we don't change it, that I would definitely recommend people to read. It's www.ancientorigins.net. And there's an article by Natalia Klimczak, and it's called Stash of Books from Which Library of Nazi Chief Himmler is Found in Prague. And it goes, a collection of 13,000 occult and witchcraft books have been found recently in the National Library of the Czech Republic of Prague. Where else? It belonged to Heinrich Himmler, the Nazi SS chief. The collection was forgotten in the library since at least the 1950s, yeah, conveniently forgotten. According to the Daily Mail, the Norwegian Masonic researcher Bjorn Helge Horseland said the books had been mostly stolen and collected during World War II. A lot of this had to do with the fact that you see, this is all when you become an empire and when you become a conquesting empire, it's very important for you to seize the arcane knowledge of wherever you go in order to destroy it. This is very important. A lot of an aspect of the first crusade into the Holy Land from Europe was to get rid of and to seek out the last of the Gnostics. That was a kind of a sideline because it was a continuum of the genocide on the Cathars which happened in southern France. Back to the article. The collection contains texts connected with witchcraft and occultism. Some of the volumes are very rare. The value of all of the books is unknown. They were gathered as the Nazis were searching everywhere for texts connected with magic and tried to accumulate everything in one place. That's because they had an occult bureau in Berlin. Some of the books were taken from the Norwegian Order of the Freemasons in Oslo, which just goes to show you for all the bullshit that the Nazis were anti-Freemasons, it was all public window dressing. They had no problem with the Freemasons once they didn't directly threaten National Socialism, and they often found them as a very useful source. In 1935, the SS created a special section called Section H Sonderkommando, so named for the letter Hex, as in Hexan, meaning witch. What did I say in Walpurgis Night? The magic that the Nazis used was Teutonic Black Hexen. The section was looking for documents on witchcraft, the occult, and the supernatural. They sought the information amongst at least 260 libraries and archives. Their work took place from 1935 to 1944. As a result, they accumulated the greatest concentrated collection on witches and their persecution in medieval Germany. This was the largest survey of witch trial records to be found in Europe. That's because the methodologies used to identify and prosecute witches was also very useful to, like, shall we say, modern law enforcement, because the real way if you want to destroy, you see, one of the reasons I get so much shit is because the intelligence services aren't going after me directly. They will whip up the mentally ill and the cults to go after me, the cults that they employ to go after me. That way their hands are clean. The Nazis wanted to go after their enemies in the same way. Rather than National Socialism being directly responsible for murdering Jews, gypsies, or anyone else they had a problem with, they would whip it up amongst the local lunatics to go out and do it. Now, this did not work in Germany, but it worked in places like the Ukraine and Poland. In fact, the SS had had trouble killing Jewish children and women because many of their members were Catholics and they wouldn't do it. And so they used to pay local alcoholics to do it, who had been whipped up on hatreds, and they would pay them in alcohol and things like that. So this was the method that they found the most useful. This would stop a paper trail in case the National Socialists lost the war. This is one of the things like, there's no proof that the Nazis killed the Jews. There's no proof. Now, there's shitloads of proof. It's how they did it. They got local maniacs in Poland, in Lithuania, and the Ukraine to do it for them. And in France, by the way. Horseland, a Norwegian Freemason historian, participated in the identification of some of the books in Prague, after he recognized many of them as ones which belonged to the Central Norwegian or Freemasonry Order Library in Oslo. He summarized, in all likelihood, many of these books are part of Himmler's so-called witch library. The books were collected for the Institute Abernevin, which was created to research the archaeological and historical roots of the Aryan race. It was founded in July 1st, 1935 by Himmler, Hermann Wirth, interesting character, and Richard Walter Dare, another interesting character. Apart from the gathering text, they also conducted experiments and expeditions, this was mostly in Tibet, and also Antarctica, but there's very little evidence we can find on the Antarctic exhibitions that they were the viable ones, that they were the ancestors of the Nordic population which once ruled the world, meaning this is another name for the Brillia. Heinrich Himmler believed that the power of the old occult masters would help the Nazis to rule the world. See, that's what I'm just saying about them using the mentally ill to whip up the same way the Puritans in America at Salem and places like that and all the colonies used up the locally mentally ill people to attack people in the colony they didn't want by claiming they were witches. He followed the witch cult hypothesis created by Margaret Murray, a famous researcher in the field. He believed in a scientific point of view of witchcraft. You see, this is very important. You have to understand that there's two kinds of the occult. There's the occult that's the esoteric occult, and this is the belief in that there's a supernatural reality to this stuff. And then there's the scientific aspect of the occult, which believes that the methodology, this is what Freemasons do, the methodology used within the occult is incredibly useful. This is what Edward Bernays and marketing and marketing and advertising do. And with time, he would become obsessed with it. He trusted that Celtic Germanic nature religions would bring him all that he desired. That's because they do. Why do you think that I'm involved in all this stuff? Why do you think that I make a big deal of heathenism? Why do you think I make a big deal of going back to our heathen and pagan roots? Because there's a lot of power to save us in that. And that's why people like, Gerald Gardner took control of Wicca, invented Wicca, because he was a British civil servant. They didn't want ordinary people discovering the power of heathenism. Himmler was doing the same. But the simple version of pure traditional aspects was not enough for him. The Nazis created the dirtiest and most corrupt version of witchcraft that ever existed. That's absolutely true. That's a very good way to phrase it. It was black hexan in the extreme. Himmler throughout taught the actions of the Catholic Church Inquisitions was purposely trying to repress an indigenous Germanic pagan nature-based religion. Volkschiss, he's absolutely right about that. Himmler was right there. They didn't only do it in Germany, they did it in Ireland and Italy and everywhere else. In a conspiracy against the Aryan race. It wasn't a conspiracy against the Aryan race, it was a conspiracy against heathenism in general and all nature-based religions. He discovered that one of his ancestors was burned as a witch. His anger at these acts appeared in anti-Christian propaganda. He began to hate Christianity and believed that he owed his successes against it to the ones who were murdered for having a knowledge of magic. That might be true, but they've written in a simplistic kind of all Nazis are evil kind of way. It's done like this is your man being quoted again. It's not, and this is probably the Daily Mail, being quoted. It wasn't like that at all. It wasn't that he had such a hatred of Christianity because of that. It was more that he saw the power of it, and he was right to. According to George Gluck, the cult which Himmler followed has its roots in late antiquity. In his book Arcana Mundi, Magic and Occult in the Greek and Roman Worlds, which I have ordered and have not read, he described the basis of beliefs which became an important part of the political life of the Nazis. The cult worshipped the horned god of the Celts, Pan, or Koronos, whatever you want, and the Greek and Roman Pan Phanos. It was a combination of gods which gave roots to the new deity, an early conception of the devil. I saw a very good film last night called The Witch, and it showed the protagonist, should we say, was a black goat that looked like the devil that was playing with the kids. It's a very good movie. You should watch it. It's like a symbolist painting brought to life. Himmler is credited with the founding of Esoteric Hitlerism. He was also deeply involved in astrology, and he tried to construct a new pseudo-Germanic neo-pagan religion, which he did, based on a cult created in his imagination. Well, it wasn't really in his imagination. It was no more in his imagination than what Gerald Gardner had done with Wicca. That's not to say Wicca is absolute bullshit nonsense, but what it's derived from isn't. And Himmler's black hexan neo-paganism was bullshit in terms of the magical power of blood, but that doesn't matter. Well, even that's kind of true. Because when you get a blood transfusion, that's why they put you to sleep, because there's two life forces fighting in your body at the same time. And if you were aware of this happening while you were conscious, you'd go crazy. He approved official pagan holidays and manipulated the facts connected with traditional pagan cults. Sorry, I'm just going to the second page here. Computer's a bit slow. This is ancientorigins.net. Researchers still debate the roots of these behaviors. It's uncertain why these kinds of religious actions and collections of witchcraft and occult books became so important for the people who worked for Adolf Hitler. All of the Nazis, including the Fuhrer, attended ceremonies of the new cult. Many of them happened in the Castle Horska, 47 kilometers or 22 miles north of Prague. Built in the 13th century, the castle still contains a Gothic chapel, a green chamber with late Gothic paintings, and a knight's drawing room. According to the local folklore, it also believes that the castle contains the gate to hell. Now, hell gates and hell mouths are very important. I was telling you about my journey a few months back into the Hellmount of Owen-Negat Cave here in Ireland, County Roscommon. And I'll be talking about that more in later shows as we get closer to my next book, which is being released, which will also deal with these kinds of ideas as well. But right now, this is the important thing of a Hellmount or a Hellgate is very important because they're entrances to the earth where people believe that other beings emerge from them. For instance, I'll give you a quick one about Owen-Negat Cave here in Ireland. Queen Maeve and her handmaiden priestess Iernu fled to Fermanagh, County Fermanagh, after a demonic giant emerged from that cave. When they got there into Fermanagh, they dissolved into the waters of Lough Erne, which is named after her priestess. And this is very deep stuff, both esoterically, mythologically, and in other ways. And it's very important to discuss. This is why I want you to get it all away from this mad truther stuff and start paying more attention to stuff like this. It's really important. And there's a link below if you want to get my book, Walpurgis Night Volume 1. The second version, which I'm fired up again now, and I started to see, I was waiting for something to interview somebody, and the man passed away in Germany. See, I'm not someone who sits on the computer and types in search engine terms when I'm writing a book. Anyone can do that. I get out in the field and examine things. For volume 1, I went to SS underground bunkers in Europe. I went out there. For Defeated Demons, I interviewed two psychopaths, two real psychopaths. And for Amble of the Psyche, I told you what I was trained to learn in Wall Street in communications. So my books are not me typing, doing a research by typing into a search engine. I'm an old-fashioned investigator. I get out there in the field with notebooks, cameras, everything. If you see the pictures I've been showing of the megalithic Odyssey, I've been going down these tombs. I've been measuring things, looking at them. And this is the way you really do things. But anyway, volume 2 of Walpurgis Night will come out after the next book comes out. And it's basically, a lot of it is written. It's just to put it in a readable style, and some new information like this has come along, and a few other things I've become privy to that will be in there. And so hold on, that is still in the works. But I'm not going to rush out anything unless for the sake of it. I'm not like these people who my next book is 3/4 of my previous book. It's nothing like that. I make sure someone gets something new every time. So hold on for that. And so anyway, that's proof that this didn't stop with the Nazis. Again, it was like everything else the National Socialists did. It was corporations who took it all over. So after the war, a lot of this is when advertising came into the fore. They were very interested in this. This is when, Werner von Braun came to NASA. But it wasn't only him, it was other people who were involved in NASA. And they were about building spaceships in the mind, castles in the air. And so when you had rituals, like the Saturn V rocket didn't just come out of a hangar. It came out of a hangar looking like an enormous phallus, or the church of a cathedral with light shining on it. You had these speeches that were one small step for man. You had all this esoteric, magical, charged and loaded language. And that was brought over with the Nazis too. This is one of the reasons that Vita Peron was so. Amy has been with Vita Peron, the former wife of the Argentinian dictator Juan Peron. One of the reasons she was so popular is because her speeches were using stuff that she had learned from the Nazis. Remember, they were very closely involved, the Argentinians, with them at that time. When Walpurgis Night Volume 1 came out, there was a huge number of hits on my website from Peru, from Paraguay, and from Argentina. These are these neo-Nazis, National Socialist communities that still exist out there. The reason why they're tolerated and left alone and not hunted down by either the early days, the Stern Gang, or later, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, is because they're told by the US government to back off, and the British government, because they own important mining, forestry, and chemical concerns in Central and South America. There's a program from the 1970s called The Hunt for Joseph Mengele. I'll put the link below in the show here. That was the World in Action TV show, and it shows just how many Nazis and how they Nazified large parts of South America. Huge numbers got away, but they were allowed to get away because they were needed. They knew stuff. And the ones that swung from the gallows at Nuremberg, they were the nobodies, believe it or not. And the ones who, ones like Rudolf Hess, who was, not even involved with National Socialism when the Holocaust, or even before. He went to England, Scotland, even before Operation Barbarossa. And he gets slapped in prison for the rest of his life. And we don't know why, because he knew shit. He knew shit, and they had to shut him up, and he knew that. And Albert Speer, why didn't he hang? The armaments minister and chief architect? It's just ridiculous. Guy who'd used slave labor and killed thousands of people building the V weapons along with von Braun. And it just goes on and on. And he was definitely an interesting. His last words ever to Hitler are very interesting. Hitler said, "Should I stay in Berlin or should I retreat and keep fighting?" And von Braun said, "When the curtain falls, you should be standing on the stage." When the curtain falls, you should be standing on the stage. So, very interesting stuff. I was supposed to go to Peru for the Megalithic Odyssey filming, but I'm not going. 2 reasons. The flight is too long. It's something like 15 hours from Dublin to Lima. I just couldn't handle that. And secondly, I don't want to be in Peru because there are vested interests in me down there who were very interested in my work into National Socialism and the occult. So it probably wouldn't be safe for me. Well, not that it wouldn't be safe, but that was one of the reasons I decided not to go to Peru. So the other part of the team will be going instead. So I hope you've all enjoyed tonight's show. It's good to be back on. I'm going to be starting to create audiobooks. These will be stories you probably never heard or read about. Some of you might have, dealing with mythology, magic. Most of them will be fiction stories. Some will be fact. And the idea is that I'm trying to, I know I went on a rampage and a rant at the beginning, but I really want you people that are into conspiracy and who are waking up to have a good grounded knowledge, to have the ability to impress people by saying, "Oh, I know about this, I know about that," and to not just, when you quote a book or quote a source, you're not quoting a book written by someone who's a known conspiracy theorist or from a conspiracy site on the website, but you're talking about respected authors, unusual authors, things that only an educated or an erudite or a truly learned person would know about, because they would have to go and find out about these things, as they don't appear on conspiracy websites. So ultimately, when I'm shouting at you at the beginning, I'm not chasing you away. I'm trying to bring you to this spot, because we need a more balanced, relaxed, and intelligent and wise insurgency if we're ever going to achieve anything. So thank you very much. Have a good week, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke.